I grew up in the countryside, right next to a national park frequently visited by nature lovers and bird enthusiasts. It was the kind of park where you're not really allowed to bike or ride horses, only walk or run. But 10-year-old me felt this was a stupid rule, so I did so anyway, because the trails were perfect for it. I knew full well that I wasn't technically supposed to do that, and was caught a few times, but nothing much came from it apart from a half-hearted "don't do it again." I did do it again, of course, until one day something frightening happened that made me stop altogether. My family were actually horse breeders, and I would often take the horses for a ride, usually in that forbidden park. This day, very early morning, the first day of the summer holiday, it was absolutely beautiful outdoors. It was misty and foggy, yet the sky promised a warm, sunny day ahead. Since it was so early, before 6 o'clock, I knew there wouldn't be anyone on the trail to see me, so I let the horse set off full speed along the trail. I only slowed down on one part that got steep on one side, leading down to the river. The thought of one step too close to the edge was too much even for a kid with next to non-existing risk assessment skills. Very suddenly, the horse came to a complete halt and refused to take another step forward. I'd grown up with horses all my life, and I knew that usually indicated that you needed to investigate. Was there something with the hooves? Did the horse spot something that spooked it? I checked and the hooves were fine, but the horse still wouldn't move an inch. When I looked back up again, that's when I saw it. Someone had set a trap, a thin, sharp metal wire across the trail, in perfect neck height for an adult. I stopped and looked around, but I didn't see anyone. The wire was well attached to 2 trees and impossible for me to remove, so I just led the horse around it. To do so, I had to walk a bit up into the wooded area on the side of the trail, and that's when I heard the singing. There's a song called Hage Tom Tigabar. It was that melody, but the lyrics were different and sung in a muffled, sniggering voice. Today, I only remember parts of it, but translated, it would have been something like, "Hey all you runners, come here passing, let the lifeblood pour out." I, as silently as I could and with my heart in my throat, slowly backed away, got up on the horse and hurried back the way I came, as fast as I could. I knew I had to tell someone about it, but at the same time, I wanted to avoid admitting to riding a huge and very forbidden horse on those protected trails. Now I was in a bit of a conundrum. The old stories about a mad old man living in the shed in the woods, a shed that was once a cottage for the local hunter, came back to me as I hung on to the horse for dear life. I got home and told my older brother what had happened. He went back there with me in tow. We found the wire trap, and after a while of searching, we also found a spear-like pole in the ground, right on the spot where you'd land if you came running and jumped over the fallen tree on the trail. And that's when we called the police. The area was searched and several similar traps were found, but no sight of that old man. The following summer, I remember there was big news in the local paper about spear-like poles being found right under the water's surface, directly under a little tower you were supposed to dive from at the lake. They also found black garbage bags filled with big rocks on the narrow bridge crossing the river, so that if a car had hit them, they would have risked going off the road and into the water. A little bit of context. My dad and I lived together in our own multi-family home in Germany. My dad has a very serious lung condition. His lungs produce and trap an excessive amount of mucus. The trapped amount is quite large and keeps his lungs from functioning correctly. It's pretty normal that he has to be picked up by an ambulance every 2 to 3 weeks, just because he can't breathe anymore. Last week, it was about that time of the month. He couldn't breathe, so I called an ambulance and he was brought to the closest hospital. This was a pretty normal experience to me, because this had happened at least 10 times in the last 6 months. I went to bed after he got picked up on Tuesday. I went to work the next morning and got a text from him that he would have to stay for at least 2 more days, until approximately Friday. Wednesday evening, I got home from work and played a match of Rogue Company when I suddenly heard someone ring on the doorbell. That was unusual because we almost never had unannounced visitors. I walked to the door and was about to press the door buzzer to open the main door when I heard, I believe, more than one voice directly in front of my door. That was weird. I asked in German, "Hello, who is it?" Silence for 3 seconds. Then a person who sounded like my father, but at the same time didn't sound quite right, answered me. "Mika, it's me. I forgot my keys. Open the door." I thought to myself, okay, in that case, wait a minute. My dad never called me by that name, and there was that sarcastic tone in the voice. I just didn't trust this situation. I called my father on his phone. If the person in front of my door truly was my father, his phone should ring, right? It didn't. Big whoop. My father answered, and as I suspected, he was still in the hospital. Meanwhile, the other 2 people on the side of the door heard my phone call and started trying to kick it in. "Let me in. It's your daddy. Let me in." Thank God that door was reinforced. After I threatened them with calling the police and having a big-ass knife in my hand, they finally left. I could hear their footsteps running down the staircase. I rushed to a window facing the street to check and see if I could see a car or at least a license plate. Nothing. Just a few footsteps in the distance. They never came back after that either. What's really weird is that they knew my real name and that my father wasn't home despite his car standing in the driveway. Shit was hitting the fan when a buddy reported something similar too. We called the police together. The investigation is still in progress. Many years ago, my friends and I were dumb, new 21-year-olds, just barely navigating the bar scene in Philly, where we all went to college. We hadn't had many weird interactions, save for the occasional creep who would hit on us even when we tried to tell him to get lost. In the July of that summer, though, we were really enjoying the outdoor cocktails at a bar in Old City when this girl walked by. She was around our age, maybe early 20s, with a really cool haircut and an outfit I just loved. She just looked to me like the very definition of cool. I don't quite know how else to put it exactly. She just looked like someone that was worth hanging out with. I was smoking at the time, and she asked me for a cigarette and talked to my friend and me for a little bit, just bitching about boys and work and that kind of stuff. My friend and I were kind of desperate to find friends because all of ours had left the city for the summer. We were really glad to have someone our age to talk to. Finally, after getting to know each other for a bit, the girl asked my friend, who we'll call Amy, and I to come with her to her apartment. She said they were holding a grand party that evening, and then she headed off. Amy and I thought to ourselves, well, why the hell not? We were already bumming around the city that evening with basically nothing to do. We might as well try to make some new friends. In my more mature mindset now, I realize that's kind of a dumb prospect. Don't follow a girl you just met over a cigarette to another location. Well, a couple hours later, we were really bored and decided to head to the address this girl had given us. Only, when we got there, we realized it was a penthouse on the river. The girl had given me her phone number though, and I texted her telling her we were there. At this point, Amy was a little bit wary. We both thought it would be some 20-something apartment, not a big penthouse. The girl came out of the elevator followed by a man in maybe his 40s or late 30s at least. I really didn't expect that. Amy and I were both trying to be polite though, so we followed them into the elevator. During the ride up, the girl told us she was a dancer. Immediately I saw that as code for stripper, but who the hell am I to judge, I thought. So what if she's a stripper? I chided myself for even making that connection. When we got to the top, around the 14th floor, the elevator opened into a big apartment. Not a hallway, just straight into the apartment. It was honestly gorgeous. All marble, TV mounted to the wall, huge rug, etc. Once we stepped inside, Amy and I felt immediately nervous. There were 3 other men there, clearly in their 40s. We again felt we had to be polite, though this wasn't at all what we were expecting. The girl ran off to another room and disappeared, while Amy and I made our way to the kitchen. One of the 40-year-olds grinned at us in this terribly creepy way and poured one of the many bottles of wine he had from a wine rack and poured us each a glass. While he was doing this and chatting with us, the other 3 men circled around us staring. Amy and I were pretty freaked out at that point, and Amy started to say we were late for a friend's house party. We started to get up to leave, but one of the men grabbed my arm and said, "You're not allowed to leave." Needless to say, that freaked us out even more. Amy and I sat back down and planned our next move by texting each other under the counter. How do we get out of here? Around that time, the girl we'd met ran back into the kitchen, completely naked. One of the guys grabbed her, and the 2 of them ran back into a room together, leaving the 3 men circling Amy and I. I was stressed out, so I decided to have a cigarette. There was a guy who had been really focused on me, so that when I went out to the balcony, he followed behind. I smoked that cigarette trying to ignore him, despite the fact it was a tiny balcony and he was staring at me the whole time. Finally, he came up and started rubbing against me. I pushed him off and went to the other corner of the balcony. It was pouring rain at this point, and I was worried about Amy, so I told the guy we both had to leave. "No, you're not allowed to leave. You have to stay. We're just getting started," he told me. That was one of the last straws. I tossed my cigarette into the rain and pushed open the sliding glass door. I grabbed Amy by the wrist and pushed the elevator button. Miraculously, the elevator hadn't moved in the time we'd been up in the penthouse. Amy and I ran inside and pressed the closed door button repeatedly, watching as the man who had followed me to the balcony charged after us, trying to catch us before the door closed. Thank God he didn't. The door closed just before he reached us, and we went downstairs, finally spilling out into the lobby. That the elevator was going right back up to floor 14. Amy and I bolted, terrified one of the men would follow us down and try to catch us. We ran into the rain and booked it down several blocks before we finally stopped. To this day, we're still freaked out by that encounter. Amy agrees with me, and has since told me that when I was out on the balcony, another man inside had told her she wasn't allowed to leave either. I don't know if that's freaky enough, but hell, it was freaky for me. So this happened to me and my best friend when we were in high school. We live in the lovely state of Hawaii, and would often go to the beach on a short walk from my house when she'd stay over. To give a brief description of us, we're both fair-skinned females, blondish brown hair and light-colored eyes. We actually both look pretty similar, except she has corkscrew curls. People would often ask us even if we were sisters while we were growing up. This is slightly important for later on in the story. Anyway, a good portion of where I grew up was on good old Iwa Beach, deep into Iwa. If anyone knows where that is or has heard of it, you know where I'm talking about. For the rest, it's an area where homeless and druggies, both buyers and sellers, tend to hang out. The beach is actually quite rocky. If you head up the beach though, there's less rocks and less people. That nicer area of the beach is the part that's closer to my house, and where we would both usually go. Kind of like our own secret beach location, but not really if you lived in that particular area. One weekend, my friend, let's name her Jessica, and I were hanging out at my house. We decided that it was a good time to go out on the beach and tan, just kinda do whatever. This particular day though, we had decided that instead of walking to the slightly less rocky beach, we'd go to the secret beach near White Plains. Not too many rocks, not too many people, nicer waves, more beach. It was about a 10 to 15 minute drive since it was like the next neighborhood next to Iwa, and I thought, why the hell not? We get to the beach and see there's not a lot of people there. It's a lovely day, so we put our stuff down and just start chilling. Then, it happens. Jessica and I had been there maybe all of 20 minutes when we were approached suddenly by a man, maybe in his 30s or 40s. Average build, dark hair, a bit of facial hair if I remember correctly. There was nothing about him at first to give us any creepy vibes. He was a local, and it was not uncommon for strangers to come up to each other on the beach and just talk to each other or ask something, so we thought nothing of it when he introduced himself as Dave. After his polite intro, he proceeded to tell us that he was a journalist/reporter for a well-known local newspaper. He was doing an article about tourists and their thoughts on less-known beaches. Jessica and I immediately gave each other that side look. Something wasn't quite right here. That sentence alone made us suspicious for a couple of reasons. One, he had no camera, notebook, pen, or anything to indicate he was taking notes for his story. Two, there had recently been a report on the news around that time that young girls were being conned into model agencies and things like that, being approached by men on beaches, the mall, anywhere where tourists and locals were known to frequent, and being kidnapped into human trafficking. And three, he had not given us any proof that he in fact worked at said newspaper, or that his name was really Dave, not even like a business card. Because of this, we decided we weren't going to trust anything this guy said. I'd also like to note that we were in a spot that wasn't a place where a lot of tourists would really know about, or even go to. They like to go to the beaches near their hotels, or ones they've read or heard about. They wouldn't drive all the way out there. Really, this was where the locals hung out. This is kind of where our descriptions come into play, because I was born and raised there even if I didn't look like it, and so was Jessica. It would be pretty easy to mistake us for some dumb tourists. Anyway, Dave says he's writing this story, right? He asks us what our names are and is starting to look at me and Jessica up and down, almost like he's memorizing what we look like and sizing us up. Never in my life had I ever gotten such major stranger danger vibes from a person, and proceeded to give him some fake name off the top of my head. Jessica followed my lead. This is where it started getting even creepier and more uncomfortable. After a brief pause and a bit of intense staring, Dave proceeded to say this. "Well, are you girls hungry? I've got some food and barbecue at my van if you wanted to hang out." He then pointed to his green-colored kidnapper van. Instantly, the red flags were flapping in the hurricane-like winds of our instincts. Why in the world would two 15 to 16-year-olds want to hang out with a middle-aged man? It was almost like the teen version of asking if you wanted candy. You just had to hop in the van with him. Dave wasn't even asking us questions about the beach or how we'd heard about it. In fact, it was like he'd completely forgotten the reason he said he was there and just wanted us to go to this van with him. We told him we were okay and thanks for the offer, hoping he would leave us alone. Of course, Dave wasn't just gonna take no for an answer. He kinda got this look on his face like he'd been taken by surprise that we had turned him down, and then got more forceful. "Are you sure? I got chicken and some drinks. It'll be really fun," he said, hoping we'd cave if he kept being persistent. Again, we told him no, and he decided to leave us alone for now, only to walk to his van, sit there, and stare at us lying on the beach. It was really unsettling just having him stare at us like that, like he was waiting to see what we would do. More so because we were two young girls in bikinis by ourselves in a somewhat closed-off beach. Thankfully, there was a group of guys that wasn't too far from us, military guys, pretty easy to tell. Jessica and I decided to take a chance and go talk to them, plus we felt a little safer knowing we weren't alone on the beach with this guy. We walked up to the group and asked them if Dave had come over to them and had asked them questions regarding this story of his. The guys looked at us confused, then looked at Dave and said he hadn't approached them at all, and they'd been on the beach for a long time before us. Jessica and I took this as a sign that it was time to pack up and go home. Dave was still watching us. He had just seen our interaction with the dudes, as we came back and gathered up our things and walked off toward my truck. We didn't immediately walk straight to it though. We kinda walked past it to see if Dave had packed up his stuff to start following us. I was parked along the road and had the trees blocking the beach on one side, so if anyone decided they wanted to snatch you up off the road, you couldn't see it from the beach. Luckily, we didn't see him though when we left, checking my rearview mirror just in case. On the way back, Jessica asked me if I had gotten that gut feeling the same time he said he was working for the newspaper. I said I did, and we both told each other the exact same things that made us feel that way. It was almost like we had read each other's minds and were seeing the exact same thing. It was a really eerie experience. I think what made it all the more unnerving was that he seemed to be looking for specific targets. He hadn't asked guys anything, and was definitely looking just for girls. Who knows, maybe he was the human trafficker and was trying to get either one or both of us into that van. I've never been back to that particular area of the White Plains since. I almost wonder what would have happened if that group of guys wasn't there, or if we hadn't listened to our gut. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the content in this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any thoughts about the stories in the video or any things you think I can do to improve the videos themselves, please be sure to leave those in the comments below, as I always read through all the comments and really enjoy it. If you guys have any stories you'd like to submit yourselves, or any stories you'd like to suggest, please take a look in the description below the video. You can find links to my Gmail, Facebook, and Twitter accounts. Send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to read it as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in your own story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. Last but not least, if you guys enjoy my narration style and you would like to see more of it, you can go ahead and check out my two alternate channels, Mr. Blue Skies and Darkest Hour. I upload true crime stories at least once a week on Mr. Blue Skies, and documentaries on Darkest Hour at least once a month. If you guys like that sort of thing and you like my voice, why not try and check them out? Maybe that content will be for you. Overall though, guys, I think that's pretty much it for now. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.